Everybody, it's Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast, where we're letting LaQuan hack into the intro script, and the Rams are the best in the what? Okay. It's me, your man, MG Marcas Grant, joined by Michael F. Florio and LaQuan Jones, and that's the last time I leave the Google Doc unlocked. We're all in studio today.
Yes. Feels good, man.
We're all together in one place. It's been multiple months since this has happened, right?
Yeah, it really has. Got the band back together.
Yeah, we're all back together for various reasons. Florio and I were doing some VOD stuff a little bit later.
NFL Plus, if you want to watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be out there at some point, hopefully very soon. And LaQuan, you're just here because you're researching, right?
I'm doing research, yes.
You are tapped. You're going to be on the reboot or the relaunching, I don't know what we're calling this, of Good Morning Football.
Yeah.
Correct?
I'm really excited for that opportunity, man. But, you know, I'm be a night owl now.
You are. You are.
We'll be able to, like, I'll be playing NCAA. You'll be waking up. We'll be able to text.
There we go.
Yeah.
That is
we
true.
We will cross paths. Like Florio and I will be showing up to work. You'll be heading to bed. You know, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it should be fun. I know it restarts on July 29th. A new new face is going to be Akbar Bajabiamila, who, if you have been following us and been watching Fantasy Live long enough, you remember Akbar as being a part of NFL Fantasy Live. Then he went on to superstardom as one of the co-hosts of American Ninja Warrior. And now he's back on NFL Network.
Yeah.
First person to ever bring me out on Fantasy Live was, I don't know if you remember, I was Akbar's stat guy.
That's
one season.
right.
I would just run out and hand him like
That's
notes.
right. That's right. Exactly. So Akbar is great. It's good to have him back. I'm sure he will tell you about the time in college that he sacked Tony Romo. I think he still has the screenshot on his phone potentially, but should be a lot of fun. So July 29th.
I cannot wait to meet him.
Good Morning Football.
I seriously cannot.
Really, honestly, legitimately one of the nicest people you're ever going to meet.
Nice.
Akbar's a great dude, a whole lot of fun. And it should be a really good addition with Jamie Erdahl and Peter Schrager and Kyle Brandt and Sheree Burris, who's also going to be joining the show as well. So be sure to check that out. Speaking of which, I guess since we're talking the programming schedule, that's not how I meant to start the show, but it sort of has happened. I do know the rumors are NFL Fantasy Live will be back for some preseason shows beginning August 12th. So we're a little less than a month from that. So you can see me and Florio and Adam Rank and Patrick Claybon and presumably Cynthia Freeland on your television coming up really, really soon. So mark your calendar. August 12th, we'll start our preseason shows. We are still doing our division previews. On Monday, we did the AFC West. So here on Wednesday, we will do the NFC West. So we'll go through the 4 teams in the division there. But we'll also have, starting off with some news and rumors, since we are talking the NFC West. The big news coming out of the division, mostly out of San Francisco, Santa Clara, whatever you want to say. Brandon Aiyuk has requested a trade. Dun, dun, dun.
Yes.
So obviously you see how LaQuan feels about it as the resident Rams fan / 49er hater. He is hoping, he is praying on the 49ers downfall for sure. My first comment on this, because obviously I have a text chain with friends who are all 49ers fans, and we were texting about it. And I was actually driving when the news first broke, and I get a text message, and when I stop, I look at it. And my response was, and I will say it here, my child often requests cupcakes. That doesn't mean he always gets cupcakes. Brandon Aiyuk has requested a trade. He is obviously unhappy with what's happening in his contract negotiations with the San Francisco 49ers. He has requested a trade. That does not mean the 49ers are obligated to trade him. Deebo Samuel in the past has had requested trades. He is still a 49er. We have seen other teams and other players request trades and teams not trade him. So I guess the first question is, Florio, do you believe the 49ers would actually trade Brandon Aiyuk?
Nope. I think he would be traded by now. We talked about it a couple weeks ago on the show. Like, if something like this was going to happen, I think pre-free agency, pre-draft especially, it would have occurred because, there's teams out there like the Bills I keep hearing people throw out. And I'm like, the Bills don't have the assets to go out and get him right now. Not at this point in the offseason. So I continue to think this is Brandon Aiyuk being like, listen, you want me here for 1 year, pay me and give me a raise, pay me as much as I can get. And yeah, there's smoke coming from Washington and stuff like that. But I don't know. I continue to think that Brandon Aiyuk is going to be a member of the 49ers this year.
Is there smoke coming from Washington, or is it because Brandon Aiyuk is out here, FaceTiming with his old college teammate who just happens to be Washington's new starting quarterback?
Yeah. And he's posting like stories that he's watching their film and stuff
like
that. Yo, that's crazy.
That's tampering.
If I'm Washington, I am heated about that right now. That really he's watching video of our offense right now. Like, yeah, I'd be a little bit heated about that part.
It's pretty nasty work, but I don't think he finds a better opportunity out there right now, to be honest, in a system that kind of know how to utilize him, and you have a decent connection with your quarterback right now. I mean, there's not really much situations that he could fall into and actually glow up, I should say, going out there getting paid for another team.
That's sort of the thing, is that he has not only fits well in Kyle Shanahan's offense, he has become a featured part, and he's been their wide receiver one for the last couple seasons, as far as I'm concerned. He's talented. There's no doubt about that. I just can't imagine he walks into another situation where he could get the same level of production that he can in San Francisco. But let's just say, for whatever reason, between now and, late August, things go completely off the rails. They go completely sideways. The situation is untenable. I mean, Washington, I guess, has been thrown out there because he's talked about Jaden Daniels. Yeah. I've heard, New England as a spot that could be really aggressive and going to get him. I mean, Florio, is there a good landing spot outside of San Francisco you could imagine for Brandon Aiyuk?
Yeah, like the Bills being one, the Chargers being one. I do think the Commanders would be a good one as well. The thing is, I think the production would come a lot differently. Like, Brandon Aiyuk is in San Fran is one of the most efficient wide receivers every year. Because like last year, 1,300, almost 1,350 yards on 105 targets.
Yeah.
Like, if he goes somewhere else, that number could be 130, 140, maybe even more than that, and he could still have similar production. It just would come in a very different way than and that's the thing I'm also curious about with Aiyuk. Like, he is awesome. I have him ranked as a wide receiver one. I have him ranked ahead of Devontae Adams. Like, I am high on Brandon Aiyuk in San Fran, but I do wonder if you pull him from there and he now goes to an offense where there isn't Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and you have to focus on everything rather than hone in on one player, would he be the same player on a different offense?
And I think it's a fair question. And I think you go back to the Super Bowl when at some point the Chiefs decided, well, we're going to take away Brandon Aiyuk. Yeah. And the Niner offense didn't really have an answer for that. And so I think the similar situation, if you go somewhere where you are the focal point, you go to New England where they don't have a whole lot of receiving options and the defense tries to take you away. Not to say that he falls off a cliff, but certainly he doesn't give you, we say 105 targets and 1,300 yards, which is the anti of it. We talked about Evan Ingram on Monday, who had like 170 million catches and like 950 yards or whatever it was. Like, it's the opposite.
The fantasy streets think we're bullying Evan Ingram. It's just that we kind of realize in live time we're probably going to be fading him.
Sometimes you just think things out loud. Like, sometimes you just got to talk it out and get yourself to a conclusion. It's not bullying. We're just we're just working things out. This is like our own little therapy session.
There you go.
We're just trying to work some stuff out. But speaking of Aiyuk maybe not being there and ADPs and all that sort of stuff, it's time to drive your draft, presented by the all-new hybrid Toyota Camry. Look, this is obviously, we are into redraft season. I should check and make sure I am not. I made a pick this morning in Scott Fish, so I am not on the clock right now. So nice. We are good there. I think I'm in like the 11th or 12th round. Like, we're moving along pretty well.
Good progress.
But obviously Aiyuk is the big story, and real football, fantasy football, everybody's sort of focusing on what's happening with him and the 49ers right now. I mean, for you, LaQuan, as these rumors continue and as there's, chatter, whether or not there's any, fire to this smoke, does this impact how you are drafting Brandon Aiyuk?
No, because you still believe in the talent, and like you said, just because he's requesting it doesn't mean that it happens. And I think if he kind of sits and settles with San Francisco, we still get that same production that we got out of Brandon Aiyuk. Nothing really changes for me. Like, I don't think there's going to be a difference of me going to the draft board and taking Brandon Aiyuk off the board because I know I'm getting a talented wide receiver. So the situation's still going to be the same for me. And like, it's early, like basically, I mean, July, but like if this was the back end of August, I would be a little bit worried, but I'd still draft him because I know the talent is there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of how it goes. Because I know, Florio, we seem to do this every year with guys, right? There's always somebody who seems unhappy. When we get these stories about players who are talking about holding out, or maybe they do hold out the first week or so in the training camp, how do you approach guys like that?
Every player I think is different, but Brandon Aiyuk is someone that I have not shied away from drafting. Like I have taken him in. I did 3. Scott Fishbowl, I have him in, and then I did 2 best ball drafts this week, and I took him in all 3 because he's sliding a little bit, and people are being like, "Oh, what if he gets traded and stuff?" And to me, I'm like, "All right, I'll just keep gobbling up the value because I think he's going to be with San Fran, and if not, I still think he'll put up numbers." But like, if Brandon Aiyuk is a star, so if we get a little bit of a discount on him, I'm willing to roll the dice. If it was more of like a middling player or something like that, I don't think the risk is worth the reward then. So every one of the, like last year, I was still taking Jonathan Taylor. I was still taking Cooper Kupp. That maybe didn't work out in some cases, but like my thinking is always I care about the end of the season so much more than I do the first month of the season because that's when you win championships.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. The other part that I would just caution people, it is July 17th.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
It is July 17th. We've still got, about 6 weeks to go, approximately, until we're starting week 1. I know the Niners rookies have reported to camp. The veterans have not yet reported to camp for the 49ers. We still have a long ways to go. And I think
he shows up.
I think he shows up at some point. And look, if we're in, 3rd week of the preseason and this is still happening, then he's going to see his ADP fall, right? But I still think until we get definitive proof that he's willing to sit out a year, because he's still under contract, mind you. He still has a contract.
Even if he holds out, he's going to play.
He doesn't really have a ton of leverage.
Yeah.
So if we get to a point where he's like really threatening and viably threatening to miss games, then maybe you start to be concerned. For now, it's
here's the other thing. I just pulled up his contract stuff real quick. He is set to make more money this year than he has in his entire NFL career.
Yeah,
so he's not gonna throw that away.
It's hard to think he's gonna just toss that aside. So at the moment, it's interesting chatter. I guess we can all wish cast him to our favorite teams or what have you.
Buy the dip. That's all I can
say. Buy the dip.
This is the last year, though, and I don't know if you agree or not, Marcus, as the 49ers fan, but I think this is the last year that we are seeing this core together.
I think so.
I hope so.
I know. I think in the end, I think Debo is probably going to be the odd man out of this group, which from a fan standpoint makes me sad. From a business standpoint, a team standpoint, I totally understand why he would be. But I'm with you. I think if they want to make a run with this core group, it's got to be this year.
That's the other thing. You think Aiyuk is going to look at this and be like, you know what? I'd rather sit out and not make any money rather than try to win a Super Bowl with these guys.
Right. Like we've been in the NFC Championship. Like how many of the last few years? Do I go to? Yeah, sure. I can go play with my friend in Washington, but they're a lot further away from a championship.
You are like 1 or 2 plays away from being the champions right now, and 1 or 2 plays away from being a 2-time champion. Like that. That's how close the 49ers have been.
Like we kind of seen this play out anyway with Le'Veon Bell. Like
Jimmy Garoppolo could have hit Emmanuel Sanders.
Oh,
is that the play that hurts you? Like not like the CMC fumble from this year, or
yeah, because this year. It wasn't one play that hurt. It was like a slow drip this year.
Those are the worst.
This is like a slow drip this year. The Emmanuel Sanders overthrow, and like on replay they show like Jimmy G and his eyes are closed, and I'm like, I'm trying to use the force. What are we doing? Like, what's happening?
You can't go to battle with your eyes closed.
Anyway, that was Drive Your Draft, presented by the all-new hybrid Toyota Camry. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. Learn more at toyota.com/Camry. Camry. NFC West, that is the division we are looking at on today's show. And as always, I will start with the caveat that these are in alphabetical order. There's no other ulterior motive to how I organize these 4 teams in this division. So just leave it at that. We will start with the Arizona Cardinals. Last year, their top fantasy scorer at quarterback was Kyler Murray, despite having to start some other guys to kind of fill in the gaps while he was returning. 146.3 points. He was QB 28. James Conner was the RB 18 overall, just over 200 points for him. Marquise Hollywood Brown, the top receiver in Arizona. It was bleak for Cardinals pass catchers, at least for Cardinals wide receivers. Hollywood, 134.7 fantasy points, wide receiver 52. And Trey McBride, the top tight end in Arizona, tight end 7 across fantasy, 181.5 fantasy points. Some of the big losses this offseason, Marquise Brown, Rondale Moore are both out. Key additions, I should say, they drafted Trey Benson. They added Desmond Ridder in a trade, and they signed a free agent, Zay Jones. They're right now, first Cardinal off the board. Not much of a surprise. Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think a lot of people have pegged to be the offensive rookie of the year. Right now, about 13.5 is the average pick where he is going off the board. So, question number 1, and I will start with you, LaQuan Jones. Marvin Harrison should be drafted in round blank.
You can get him on the back end of the first round. I'm not mad at that, but he's going in the early second round. So in those 2 areas is where you should be looking to target him. Because honestly, he's going to be the engine that makes this offense go downfield. I mean, alpha wide receiver here that we're talking about, where he's going to see a ton of targets, and the production is going to be great because you have Kyler Murray back healthy to go.
So you're saying you should take him ahead of Greg Dortch?
Yes. I'm mad you got me to say that, but yes.
Look, I mean, I know you are like, the chief spokesperson of Dorchland. Like,
we're going to Dorchland this year.
You are like, leading the Dorchland Chamber of Commerce and everything. So I just wanted to make sure we got that on record there. Marvin Harrison, I mean, second round pick. Does he live up to that ADP? I know we've seen wide receivers, Florio, go out and have really good years as rookies. This feels like the earliest in a while that we've drafted. I'm trying to think of another rookie receiver we've drafted this early. Because even like prime Odell Beckham, maybe Jamar Chase had that issue where we thought he was blind in one eye and had skillets for hands or something like that because he had like a couple bad preseason games.
Watkins got hyped a lot, but that's a decade ago and he wasn't going this early. I mean, even Justin Jefferson. I mean, there was like, he's just a slot receiver. Like there were reasons these other guys got knocked down early. Yeah. This feels like the earliest we've gone for a rookie receiver in a while. And I think he's a round 1 pick. I think there's 9 true wide receiver 1s this year, in my opinion at least, and he is one of them. I look back at what Kyler Murray was able to do with DeAndre Hopkins and consistently make him a top 5 wide receiver while he was healthy. And I think Marvin Harrison, maybe not in year 1, could be even better than that. Like he is a field stretcher, so he could put up points in chunks. He is going to be their GOAT. I love Trey McBride. He is not great in the red zone. That's like the one weakness in his game. So I think Marvin Harrison Jr. could easily get double-digit, maybe even 12+ touchdowns in year 1. I know it all sounds very bullish, but like, we've seen repeatedly year after year now rookie wide receivers come in and be more ready than ever to make a year 1 impact. And I love the fact that like Marvin Harrison he doesn't care about the combine and running the 40 and all that. He's like, I want to be ready week 1 to be the very best football player I can be. And I'm bullish on this whole Cardinals offense as a whole.
I love that Marvin Harrison basically was just Kenny Powers. He was like, I play real sports, not trying to be the best at exercising. He's like, I'm not doing this combine madness. I'm not. He's like, I'm ready to play football.
I'm him.
Right.
Come on.
And it is one of those situations that we all dream about where it's talent meeting opportunity, right? I mean, you're talking about the guy who was rated as the top wide receiver prospect in this draft, going to a situation where they don't have any alpha wide receivers. It is everything that we would want in fantasy, and that is exactly why he is coming off the board late first, early second round. I mean, I give you a little bit of a hard time about Greg Dortch, LaQuan. I mean, you're not. I mean, listen, realistically, you are not the only person who is talking up Greg Dortch. Yeah. But let's be just frank about this. I mean, what are your expectations for him? I mean, ceiling wide receiver 3. I mean, what are you looking at for Dortch this year?
So Dortch, I'm just looking for him to play between 12 to 15 fantasy points per game, just based on what we've seen when he's giving the opportunity. In the games that he played 70% of the snaps in the last 2 seasons with Kyler Murray, he averaged 14.5 fantasy points per game. So we're looking at a guy that has always been there and be able to be a guy to step up when his name is called and put up fantasy points when he's given the opportunity. So you're looking at Kyler Murray co-signing him, which is a great co-sign, saying his ability and understanding of coverage and how to separate is at an elite level. So therefore, you're looking at when Kyler Murray returned back from injury, that second game where he came back, Greg Dortch led that team in targets. This is with Marquise Brown, Trey McBride, and James Conner, et cetera, et cetera. But from week 10 and on, he led that wide receiver core in targets. So obviously, there's a reason why Kyler Murray is going to be on him so heavily to bail him out on third down and et cetera, et cetera. Greg Dortch is a dynamic player. So even in fantasy, when you get in the double dipping opportunities on return yards that I've been talking about for a while, but you're looking at his stats last year. He had the second most missed tackles on return last year. So he's elusive, he's explosive, and you're getting this guy in the slot where he makes a lot of mismatches.
I'm very curious to sort of watch training camp preseason because obviously MHJ is the wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
They did invest a little bit draft-wise in Michael Wilson the year before. I feel like that's going to be the battle for wide receiver 2.
Yeah.
It's a Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson battle, and that's one I want to keep an eye on to kind of get a sense of who it's going to be. I saw the photos of, Kyler Murray hanging out with Greg Dortch, looking like, post. Yeah. I saw the, post-workout, this dude's hanging out or whatever. Like,
he's a beast, man, waiting to feast.
I'm just waiting to see. Will we get reports of, Greg Dortch showing up with Krispy Kreme at the
there you go, showing up with breakfast and coffee, man. Let's get it.
Him and Kyler having Egg McMuffins. Actually, they would probably be playing NCAA football together or something like that, right? Like,
yeah, they're probably really buddies like that.
If they're like Twitch streaming together, then it's real at that point. Florio, does Trey Benson have standalone value, or will it take James Conner getting hurt for him to get on the field?
I think it's going to take James Conner getting hurt. I think Trey Benson will have a role while James Conner's healthy. I just don't know if it is a large enough role to trust starting in fantasy. And I think he could be one of those players where, like, 1 week he gets like 12 touches and we're like, all right, you can trust this guy now. He's getting enough work behind James Conner, and then the next week he'll get like 6, because the Cardinals were kind of like that last year with their RB2. It changed based on the matchup and stuff like that. But while James Conner is healthy, I think he'll play 60+% of the snaps and have a very strong stranglehold on the touches on the ground, especially near the goal line. So I think he's one of the top handcuffs. I'm just not sure he's going to have a role unless Conner gets hurt.
I have kind of come around to that. I think early on I thought maybe he would carve out a role in this offense. I'm with you. I think it's going to be sort of minimal. Everything that you're hearing out of Arizona suggests this is James Conner's. It's still his job, and that they will sort of sprinkle in Trey Benson, but I think it's going to be when Conner gets hurt that you see mostly Benson. That being said, I still would take a late shot on Trey Benson in drafts.
Yeah.
Depending on how deep your redraft league is. Certainly in best ball, I'm definitely taking the shot. Depending on how deep your redraft league is in the situation, it might be worth it because he could be one of those guys that later in the year does have an impact on this team.
You hear a lot like, oh, it's don't take your own handcuffs, takes other people's handcuffs. And I genuinely agree with that. But like a situation like this, if I have James Conner, I want to cover my bases.
I want to cover my bases because Conner he's only played 15 games in a season once.
Yeah.
Right. So like that feels like that really is buying an insurance policy.
Absolutely.
Is getting Trey
You're
Benson.
buying a good insurance policy because Trey Benson can play.
Yeah.
This is one of the top running back prospects this year.
Exactly.
For a reason.
Exactly. So for sure, I make sure to do that. Moving over to the Los Angeles Rams, their top scorers this past year. Matthew Stafford was their top QB. No surprise there. 265.7 points, QB 15. Kyron Williams had a phenomenal season last year. RB 7, 255 points for him. Puka Nacua, who just blew everyone away. A wide receiver 4, just shy of 300 fantasy points for him. Tight end, not so great. Tyler Higbee was a tight end 23, 108.5 points for him. Key losses. Yeah, they lose Aaron Donald. That doesn't really affect our fantasy drafting I see
affects my heart.
I see your sad. Yeah, I see the sad face you put here in the show sheet about Aaron Donald being retiring. Which, side note, I've been fortunate to pick up a little side hustle doing some radio here in Los Angeles, and one of the hosts at the station I do some work at, he has no proof, he has no facts or anything to back it up, but he believes in his heart that Aaron Donald's going to come back and play football.
No, man, don't tell me that.
Don't tell me that. Yeah, he's like, I don't have any information, no inside information. He's like, I just think that he's not done, that he still has some good football left, and that maybe after a year or so out, he'll decide that he wants to come back and play.
A year or so out?
I mean,
don't do that. Don't give
I'm
me
sure.
hope.
I'm sure he'll take a year to be like, I'm gonna be retired and like
he's gonna go the Gronk route
and and just like relax or whatever. And then maybe after a year, he's like, wait a minute, I still miss it. Again, there's no facts behind it. It's just it's all vibes. It's all vibes. It's all vibes.
I was gonna say, man, he's getting up there. He's 33, and then I realized we are 2 months apart in age, so I won't say that.
Honestly, that's why I kept cheering for Tom Brady to stick around, because like he's 3 months younger than me. I'm like, dude, keep doing your thing,
keep
dog.
Going.
Like keep going, dog. Some of the additions, they do add a guard to help on the offensive line, Johan Jackson, and they add Jimmy Garoppolo, who I just lamented about overthrowing Emmanuel Sanders. So good luck with that. First off the board, no surprise there, Puka Nacua after his phenomenal rookie season, right around pick 10 or so. All right, so I'm going to ask you this, LaQuan, as the resident Rams fan here. The future of Kyren Williams, right? Because he was amazing last year. I don't think anybody expected him to do what he did. The fact that they loved him so much, they shipped Cam Akers off to Minnesota. But they also went out and drafted Blake Corum this year. What does the future look like for Kyren Williams for those who maybe are holding him or maybe considering adding him in Dynasty?
Well, we know how great the talent is. We know he can ball. We saw last year, we saw the numbers, which is great. He's a free agent in 2025. They drafted Blake Corum, and you're looking at the injury history starting to pile up. And from a business side, can you honestly think the Rams are going to invest as high as they invested into a Todd Gurley or et cetera? I really don't see it happening, because Blake Corum is a talented running back as a backup that can probably leap him at any point if Kyren Williams is off the field with injury. So you're looking at some of the qualities that Blake Corum brings. You know, he's great in the red zone, the lateral speed, he's quick, shifty. This dude is the guy that you want to have in open space. You can get a little bit more pop out of him, also in screen passes as well. But I feel like Kyren Williams has to prove that he can sustain a full workload as a RB1. So in Dynasty right now, I hate to say this as a Rams fan, but I'm looking to sell as quick as possible, being that this year might be the only year you can get this high price in return for him.
I just keep holding on to the fact that traditionally, in the post Todd Gurley era, Sean McVay has been reluctant to just consistently lean on one guy. And the fact that when it comes to draft capital, they have slightly more invested in Blake Corum than they do in Kyren Williams. Now, I don't think that means they're just going to suddenly punt Kyren away this year. Like after what he did last year, he's still going to be the RB1, and he's still going to get a lot of work. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see Corum chop into that a little bit. And I guess Florio, I'll ask you the same question I asked you about Trey Benson. I mean, does Blake Corum potentially have a standalone value in this offense, or is he strictly the understudy to Kyren Williams?
I think he'll have a role. I feel kind of similar as Trey Benson, though. I'm not sure if it'll be large enough where you could start Blake Corum in fantasy if Kyren Williams is healthy. I know we keep saying it, like McVay has, since Gurley has not had one running back that he trusts. I'm not sure, though, if that is McVay changing or if that's more about Cam Akers and the fact that he just flat out couldn't trust one running back for the last couple of years.
They wanted to trust Cam Akers.
They did.
They really did.
And there were stretches where McVay was like, all right, you're getting 25 touches this game, and we're not using another running back. He used Darrell Henderson like that for a bit last year. So I think they probably want to use Corum enough to keep Kyren fresh and keep him on the field.
Yeah.
But I don't think that this is going to be anywhere close to a 50-50 split. Like, I do believe Kyren Williams is still the guy. I agree with LQ's point, though. Like, if you could sell him now and get a boatload in Dynasty, do it. Yeah. But for redraft at where he's going in the third round, I find myself a lot more likely to draft him than I thought I would be when I expected him to be a borderline first or second round pick.
Yeah. I don't know what to think. Again, he's another one that in best ball I'm definitely taking shots at. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what I do in redraft leagues. And I said this before. Like I want to wait for preseason, but we know that Sean McVay doesn't play his dudes in the
He ain't
preseason.
playing them.
So like we're gonna learn absolutely nothing.
Week 1 is when you learn everything.
Yep, we're not gonna learn anything from the preseason about what the Rams are gonna do with their offense at all. I mean, Florio, I'll stick with you here though. Like Puka Nacua obviously was a phenomenon last year for everybody who drafted him late. Look, there are a lot of people who liked him. Not enough to like plant a super flag, but like enough to draft him late, right? Like I took him late in a couple of drafts. I was like, hey man, let's see what happens if this kid maybe gets on the field a little bit.
Yeah.
Turns out he was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver last year, right? So now we're drafting him late first round. Are we drafting him at his ceiling? And I guess the corresponding question to that is, does this mean we're underdrafting or forgetting about Cooper Kupp?
I think yes to both of those, but just because we're potentially drafting Puka around his ceiling doesn't mean he's a bad pick. Mm-hmm. Like if you could get him there late first, and I'm going to get, I'm not banking on the 1,500 yards we got last year. Mm-hmm. I would take him expecting 12 to 13, and if he gave me that, I'm satisfied. But I do look at what he did after Cooper Kupp returned last year, throw out the first month where he was getting 15 and 20 targets the first 2 games of the season. He was on pace for just under 1,300 yards and 86 catches, which is 20 less catches and 200 less yards than he ended up actually finishing with. But that also, I think what gets overlooked when you compare these two numbers a lot, people often throw out the first month, but then they leave the part of the season in where Cooper Kupp sustained a high ankle sprain, played 27% of the snaps one game. The next 2 weeks he played, but he came out and flat out said, like, I was not healthy. Yeah. He played the decoy role. So I throw those 3 games out as well. And then when you look at the game log for Puka, there was a lot of huge games where he put up like 150 plus yards, but then there's a lot of games where he's sitting in the 27, 50, 41, 32. So I think his range of outcomes week to week is very wide.
I think we are drafting him at his ceiling. I think the counterpoint to that is his ceiling apparently is very high. Right? Yeah. So that's sort of the good news with that part. I think with Cooper Kupp, I think we're starting to just bake in our concerns about a guy who, while he has been very good, first off, it's wild to think when you look, he's only had 2,000-yard seasons in his career, which is sort of mind-blowing. He's only had 2 seasons with double digits, only had 2 seasons with more than 6 touchdowns. It just feels like he's put together this string of phenomenal years which he's been very good. I'm not going to take that away from him. He's had a lot of very good years, but he's also, kind of been beat up the last couple of years.
Exactly.
And I think at, a guy who just turned 31, who's had a growing list of injuries, I think that's sort of where you're seeing the ADP kind of come down on him a little bit. And correspondingly, that means, well, if the ball's not going to be going to Cooper Kupp, it's got to be going somewhere. And that is why we're seeing Puka Nacua get drafted where he is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like my roster build and redraft this year, Puka's not a bad pick in the first round. I do want to get out of the habit of saying it's a bad pick, but I feel like we're drafting him and his ADP is banking on Cooper Kupp getting hurt, because when Cooper Kupp was banged up, he still was able to be Cooper Kupp at times. If you look at last year, he still has the ability to get behind the defenders. I mean, 3.3 separation target rate last year when targeted at 20-plus yards. So he still has the big playability in him, and he's a guy that he's going to be Matthew Stafford's #1 target when it comes to crunch time. That's where I'm banking on this year. He's healthy. So I think we're overlooking him to where I feel like my roster builds when I go wide receiver or wherever I do in the first couple of rounds, and then I can get Cooper Kupp as my wide receiver 2 or 3. My team just feels a lot more better just having a guy that I know is the guy when healthy.
And to the injury point, I'm someone, I think injury prone gets way overhyped and everything. If he had a severe injury where he needed surgery or something like that, sure. Or if it was the same injury over and over again. 2 years ago, he suffered a high ankle sprain and the Rams were awful and they were like, listen, we're just shutting him down. And then last year, I think the hamstring strain in preseason derailed his entire season. Yeah. So I do think there's a chance to where Cooper Kupp, maybe not what he was the greatest receiver year ever, but I do think he could be a lot better than what we've seen last year. Because remember, 2 years ago, he was on pace to match what he did in
Yeah.
that crazy season he had where he was offensive player of the
Triple
year.
crown.
So I think the injuries get a little overhyped when it comes to Cooper Kupp.
Side note, is there any other receiver where we say his whole name every time we talk about him? No one. We never just say Kupp. We're always Cooper Kupp.
Yes,
Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
I mean, just because it's so it rolls off the tongue. It sounds fun.
It's a
Cooper
cool
Kupp.
name.
Puka Nacua is probably another
You
one
can't
too.
talk bad about him. He's right
No.
here.
No, I mean,
There you
like,
go. That's my guy.
it's
See the ring?
it's not an insult. It's really an observation. That's
Yeah.
all. Puka Nacua is kind of getting that way too, because like we just sort of, I guess we say Puka.
Puka is
Puka.
just the one name.
We'll just say Puka, but
Puka.
He's like Cher.
But Cooper Kupp, like we say the whole, it's like a Tribe Called Quest. You say the whole thing. Hey, by the way, the top 100 is back. Find out who the players voted as the best player in the NFL. Head to NFL Plus starting July 22nd for exclusive daily drops and to find out who took home the trophy. Go to plus.nfl.com to sign up today. Now's the part of the show where LaQuan Jones gets to be a hater. We're going to talk about the San Francisco 49ers. Last year, Brock Purdy was the QB7. Despite all the haters. The haters will say it was faked, but he had 356.7 fantasy points, was QB7. No surprise that Christian McCaffrey was the RB1 because that's what Christian McCaffrey does, just goes out and scores a whole lot of fantasy points. And I'm sitting here feeling robust things. I didn't put it in the sheet. 391.3 points for Christian McCaffrey. Brandon Aiyuk, the apparently disgruntled Brandon Aiyuk, was your wide receiver 14, 249 points for him. And George Kittle, even in a quote-unquote down year, was the tight end 5 with just over 203 fantasy points. Key losses. Well, at the moment, we're still sort of waiting. We'll see if Brandon Aiyuk is there or not. But for the moment, everything is pretty much intact with this offense. They did go out and draft Ricky Pearsall. They signed Josh Dobbs in free agency. First off the board, no surprise, it is the aforementioned CMC. High first round, usually pick 1.3, somewhere in there, depending, or rather I should say he's averaging the 1.3. So he might be first, he might be second. Depends on how your league shakes out.
There you go.
Florio, Ricky Pearsall, we mentioned he was drafted. He was put on the non-football injury list to start training camp, but there's been a lot of talk that whenever the Niners sort of break up the fellowship of the ring, and whether it's Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel or whomever, that really is going to be Ricky Pearsall's time to shine. But, with the rumors swirling about Brandon Aiyuk wanting out, is it worth throwing a dart at Ricky Pearsall late in a draft just in case?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I've been targeting him in my best ball drafts. If you're doing redraft right now, yeah, I think so. Because if we're talking now late August and Aiyuk is still on the team, then in redraft where rosters are a lot shallower, I'll probably go in a different direction. But I do like Pearsall. I liked him as a prospect. I said he kind of reminded me of Adam Thielen in the sense that he could play in the slot and out wide, and good hands, good route runner. Just a piece that that Kyle Shanahan will have an absolute field day with, I think. And that's the thing, like, even if Aiyuk and Deebo are there right now, injuries happen. So, like, in best ball and stuff, I want this guy because I trust Shanahan and the 49ers system that even if they have to throw in a backup, they'll get the most out of him.
I think he definitely fits in the offense, right? He is a Shanahan guy in the sense of he can run routes, he can get open, they can find ways to get him the football. I think he probably maybe pushes out Jawan Jennings a little bit because last year there was third and Jawan was a real thing for this offense, but it wasn't enough to bank your fantasy hopes on, right? Like he was a guy who was really key. He had a lot of big catches for that offense and helped move the chains in big situations. We saw it in the playoffs. He did that. There was a point in the Super Bowl where he looked like he was going to be the MVP, like early on in the Super Bowl. It's like, will Jawan Jennings actually be Super Bowl? Like, no, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. But it looked like it was going to be. I think Ricky Pearsall eventually starts to play that role. I think in deep leagues, he's worth that dart throw late. He's definitely worth it in best ball leagues. Yeah, redraft. Keep an eye on him.
Wait and see.
Keep
Still
an eye,
early.
Keep an eye on the Aiyuk news there. All right, if we're sitting here playing hypotheticals though, LaQuan, if there is no Brandon Aiyuk, does that put a big dent into Brock Purdy's potential?
Probably not a big dent, but it will be a noticeable dent. I mean, you're looking at Ayuk as one of his most reliable targets out there when it comes to hands, route running, understanding where to be in the offense. And you look at Ayuk as this alpha, and then you remove him. It's kind of like, all right, who's going to step up to be that next reliable target? I think he will be fine for most cases in real life football, and for fantasy, he should take a dip down with Ayuk gone, because I really feel like, Debo will have to step up. He probably get more involved. Not saying anything knocking towards him, but this could be a good thing for George Kittle, because that was his second best option when targeting him last season when it came to completion percentage. So I don't think it will be a huge dent to Brock Purdy, but you're just hoping that Ricky Pearsall kind of steps up into that role when he's ready to go, to step up as another weapon, because we saw the catch radius is insane. Or Pretty Ricky, I call him. Smoothest route runner out of the class, I would say. It's just like, this dude can really do anything, playing outside, playing the slot. You look at his highlights, you're like, man, this is a Kyle Shanahan guy, to where he's going to deploy him and get the best out of him. So I really feel like Brock Purdy is still sitting pretty where he's at.
It's funny because Purdy is a guy that, he gets drafted outside the probably top 12 quarterbacks in a lot of situations. I was finding it harder as best ball season went on to be able to get Purdy, though. Like, I felt like people were I don't know if people were like seeing me try to like quietly put together a stack and just wanted to, like,
people love to disrupt
be jerks and like and snipe me. I'm like, what did I do to you? Like, I don't even know you, Cowboys fan 37. Like, what are you doing? But I did know, like, I think people sort of understand that, no matter how you feel about him, the dude's putting up numbers.
He is.
And I think that, some of it is the offense that he is in, for sure. Some of it's just that, like, the guy makes plays.
Yeah, they said that about golf too. Like, they're kind of similar, like they're just guys that go out there and do their job and execute. I mean, You can't really knock that.
I said this last year on the show, like, it felt like the biggest knock on Brock Purdy was like, well, he doesn't do what Patrick Mahomes does. And I'm like, well, yeah. Sure.
Patrick Mahomes.
People cross wires because they're always like, well, he's like the 8th most important player on that offense. And I don't disagree with that. Like, I think the weapons and Kyle Shanahan are all more important than Brock Purdy is. But for fantasy, I don't care.
Don't care.
I get all of those points the same from Brock Purdy.
Can he execute? That's all I care about.
He's the guy who, like, he plays within the structure of the offense. And every once in a while, he will actually go out and do some things. And, like, that's all you need.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
I do think losing Aiyuk would be a huge dent to his value, because last year was about 50% of all the production that came, touchdowns, catches, yards, came on deep balls, were all to Brandon Aiyuk. So I think that you lose that aspect of the offense. Now you can't load, like, maybe you could load up more closer to the line of scrimmage and make life a little tougher.
Yeah.
Deebo Samuel, a guy that does a lot of great things for the 49ers. He is one that I feel like is more valuable in real football than he is in fantasy football. And I'm looking here at what his ADP is right now, being drafted as the wide receiver 16. Just after Jalen Waddle, just ahead of Mike Evans. Is he being overdrafted, LaQuan?
I don't think so, man. I honestly think with this Aiyuk news, people are going to be thankful to get Deebo, because they're hoping for him to return back to form of being the guy that can get the rushing attempts, being a little bit more explosive, a little bit more reckless with his body, because that's really when he was like at his peak of just performance. But
when he was Deboing people.
Yeah, when he was Deboing people, but he got the bag, so now he's good. But I feel like Debo, he's still one of those assets you got to be thankful to have on your rosters, really, no matter where you get him. I mean, we're not getting him in the first 2 rounds, but that 3rd round, like, if you're looking for a wide receiver 2 or a 3, if you're being as wide receiver heavy as I am in most of my builds and redraft, I think you're still in a great spot, sitting pretty.
I just think the week-to-week variance can be wide.
It can be
with him.
Yeah.
I would argue year to year as well, because he was 3 years ago, he was a top 3 wide receiver in total points and points per game. Then 2 years ago, he was wide receiver 28 in points per game. And then last year was wide receiver 12. It's touchdown, but like, he was the only player in the NFL last year with 5 receiving and 5 rushing touchdowns. Yeah. If he loses a couple of those touchdowns, I feel like he's probably a little bit closer to being top 20, maybe even a little bit outside of that.
Yeah, he's a really good player, and he does a lot of really good things for the 49ers. I just feel like I feel like maybe we're still holding on to that season from 2 years ago when
that's his career year.
He did everything, but that was also out of necessity because they had so many injuries that he caught the ball, he ran the ball. I think he even threw a touchdown, somewhere late in the season.
He was Wolverine that year. They basically would have to pull him off the turf, and we'd be like, "All right, Debo's done for the day." And then the next 2 plays later, he's back out there doing amazing.
That's what
things.
happens when you back check chasing. So there you go.
Hey man, whatever works. I feel like he's a guy that we look at what he does in totality, but it doesn't necessarily always translate to fantasy. And I feel like, I've been drafting Aiyuk over Debo for the most part.
Yeah, I have.
As you should.
I have them decent. I have Aiyuk, I think, at 10 or 11 in my rankings, and Debo is closer to 20.
See, and at least right now, where he's going, like they're not that far apart, right? I think now Aiyuk is wide receiver 14, Debo's wide receiver 16. I feel like there's a bigger gap there.
That gap should be a little.
I feel like there's a bigger gap there between the two of them. Sure. Yeah. Our last team in the NFC West is the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith was their top quarterback, QB 19. Couldn't quite follow up his career season from the year before, 229.3 points for him. Kenneth Walker, the RB 19, just shy of 200 fantasy points there. DK Metcalf, the wide receiver 21, 225.4 points. Noah Fant, their top tight end 31, 73.4 points. No real notable losses in the offseason. They did add Sam Howell through free agency. They also added an offensive lineman, center Nick Harris from the Cleveland Browns. DK Metcalf, first Seahawk being drafted right now, 26.9 fantasy points for him. Change at offensive coordinator. Ryan Grubb comes in. Mike McDonald is the new head coach after Pete Carroll steps down. Ryan Grubb led the offense at the University of Washington. I mean, look, Florio, people were excited about Michael Penix. They were excited about Rome Odunze. They had pieces there. The Huskies could score points. Will this be more of a vertical offense now with those guys running the show?
That's the hope. Like Grubb was able to do a really good job. Odunze was the star of the show, but they had 3 viable wide receivers in Washington, and Penix put up huge numbers. They were last year 8th highest pass percentage of Power 5 schools, but the Seahawks last season already threw at the 7th highest rate in the league. That was a little bit more of a necessity, trailing a lot, having to throw, but friend of the show a little bit, like Scott Engel, you guys know I do a radio show with him on the side, and we talk a lot about Seattle. Trust me, when you're with Scott, you're talking Seattle. I thought he was a Patriots fan. He is a Patriots fan.
Seattle and the Yankees, like that's the whole gig, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, like I have a tough time buying into this Seahawks offense becoming one of the better passing attacks because it's still a defensive-minded head coach who came from Baltimore's system, which has always been ground and pound and stuff like that. And then, yes, I understand you have this new young OC, a lot of success in college, but he's never done it at the NFL level. And then your quarterback is still Geno Smith. Like, no disrespect to Geno, but he had one good year in his NFL career, and it was largely propped up by a high touchdown rate. So I think, like, I still view DK as kind of like a wide receiver too, who can have some big weeks, but will also just be kind of up and down all year. And I don't know, do you guys disagree? Am I too low on this offense? Or
I don't know. I think we're kind of too low on it, just expectations wise of Grubb. I think him coming in and turning that program around rather quickly with Washington is pretty impressive. I mean, what we honestly could expect from this offense, honestly, is like a lot of quick passes, a lot of deep shots, because Penix led the FBS last year with the most passes of 20-plus yards. So I'm thinking those big shots could really benefit DK. If we're thinking about those big weeks, I think it'll be more frequent. And even looking at Geno as a passer downfield, he's 3rd in completion percentage in these last 2 seasons on passes of 20-plus yards. So I think if you're going to open this offense up as a more vertical offense to be more aggressive going downfield, JSN's one of those benefactors there too as well.
That was going to be my question to you, right? Because Jaxon Smith-Njigba last year, it was a disappointing season, but I think when you step back and look at it, it was less about the player and more about the scheme and the system, right? They used him as a short option. I know he was kind of banged up at the start of the year. A lot of the routes he was running were pretty much close to the line of scrimmage. It wasn't a big average depth of target. does this mean we can expect more downfield throws for JSN? And as much as it hurts my heart to say this because I am a bona fide Tyler Lockett stan, does Jaxon Smith-Njigba push Tyler Lockett aside as the wide receiver too?
I think it can happen. And I say this only because Tyler Lockett has been close to my heart too, as one of those guys that we've been drafting as undervalued guys. But I think this is the year, where JSN breaks out, being utilized more to where his skill set is. Those couple of deep shots last year, a couple of touchdowns he had where he's lined up at wide and he's taking a deep shot and he's taking it to the house. He has home run ability. And I think some of those plays, with him close to the scrimmage doesn't get taken away completely because the dude has yak in him. So if you're going to have this vertical offense, I think we might see JSN more utilized downfield where I think he could really excel. So I'm banking that this is going to be the breakout season. I mean, even if JSN finishes outside the top 30, to me, that's a breakout season, and that's a huge win in my book, especially where he's going in drafts.
He's the one that I want most of this receiving core.
Yeah, he's the guy that I'm really optimistic about him this year.
I think Lockett. It pains me to say you as well, LaQuan, but we've been talking him up for years as like a guy we like a lot, and I think he's just last year was the beginning of the end. Like you look at every metric of his, and it was career worse, or worse in the next gen stats era, pretty much. And then I think the plan from day one was JSN, you're going to learn year one under these two guys, and then year two is when you're going to take over. And I think we get that. Maybe the first month of the season it's a little bit slow as there's an adjustment period, but I think JSN is going to firmly be this team's wide receiver too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is sort of what's coming. I would not be surprised at all. And I do think this is going to be more of an attacking downfield offense. So we'll see. But I'm kind of with you guys. I think this is sort of the last hurrah for Tyler Lockett as even a slightly viable
he's like the #1 realtor in the Seattle area, I believe. So he's doing all right.
Is he really?
He is a real estate agent on the side, and I think he like sells houses to his teammates and
That's
stuff.
awesome.
Oh, wow.
Like it is a legit, like DK was like, he's at practice, we're all studying the playbook. This dude's reading up about housing and stuff like that. Like
that's kind of dope, actually.
Yeah.
I
love that for
I
him.
respect the hell out of that. That's pretty dope. Not gonna lie. Last thing here, the backfield situation. Kenneth Walker is the RB1, but Zach Charbonnet is still hanging around there. I mean, LaQuan, how do you expect this thing to shake out in the backfield?
Man, I was trying to do my rankings the other week, man, and like I don't know where to put Kenneth Walker. Like, are we expecting just like another like mid-tier-ish RB2 season from him? I mean, Zach Charbonnet is going to be involved. I mean, that's honestly what we can expect. Last season, this dude was getting on the field more times than we actually wanted to see Zach Charbonnet. And I know coming out of college, he was like 6.6 yards per carry, like efficient runner, and like you kind of don't want that behind Kenneth Walker. So I'm really not too sure what to expect out of him. So how I treat things, I just avoid the headache. If I don't know it and I can't really break down in my head a decision, like I honestly don't want any parts of this backfield.
Same, Florio?
I'm a little bit more likely to, especially Charbonnet, where he's going is so late in drafts that I'm like, all right, I'll when I'm looking for backup running backs, I'm fine throwing a shot on him. But one thing you hear a lot is like, well, in the second half of the year, Charbonnet really ate into Kenneth Walker's workload. And it's like, in snaps only, from week 8 on, when they both played, it was 51 to 49% snaps, but 106 carries for Walker to 37 for Charbonnet, and 20 targets to 19. And the Charbonnet people might hold your hat on that. He was supposed to be the pass-catching back. So the fact that Walker had more targets to me is a little concerning. And Walker is still so explosive that I don't love him at cost, but I'm always tempted to take him.
I did like Charbonnet coming out of college, and then I would watch him in the NFL, and he looked slow.
Yeah,
he looked like a plotter, and I'm like, I don't remember this version of him at UCLA. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the snaps went up significantly over the back half of the season, but if it doesn't equate to touches, then what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Headache. It is. It's no good for anybody, right? It's frustrating for the Kenneth Walker people because your guy isn't on the field as much. It's frustrating for the Charbonnet people because he's just set decoration out there. So I don't know what we're doing. So we'll figure it out though. I can say that I really haven't drafted a ton of them. Either way, because I'm sort of like you, LaQuan, that I don't really know what's happening here.
And the O-line's terrible too on top of that.
So I generally have not drafted a ton of either guy just because of the confusion at this point. All right, there you go. There's our look at the NFC West. Next week, we will dive into the North divisions, AFC and NFC North. So that should be a whole lot of fun there. The AFC North is going to be an absolute rock fight all year long with those 4 teams. So look forward to diving into those as well. And we'll be back with you tomorrow, Thursday, for the cheat sheet. Gladiator is the film on tap.
I still got to watch it.
Yeah, watch it, man. Maximus Decimus Meridius. And his adventures in ancient Rome should be a whole lot of fun. So we will jump on with the cheat sheet. We'll be with you live streaming on YouTube as always. But in the meantime, that'll do it for this edition of the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. Stay happy, safe, and healthy. Do good and live well. We'll see you on the interwebs on Thursday. We'll talk to you on the pod next week.